All right, hey, before I bang today, I do want to note that I said probably a couple weeks ago that I kind of wanted to start mixing in a little bit more Chicago-esque topics, and that's kind of like one of the first ones that's coming at you today. I was born and raised here. Obviously, I care deeply about this city. Obviously, it's going through its own challenges for sure. So I wanted to bring on Paul Vallas, who I'll get to shortly, and just kind of give his outlook on the city and whatnot. I interviewed him in 2019 when he was running for mayor. So just kind of letting people know what they're in for, because it might be a little bit more Chicago specific. But the way I see it, a lot of you people have been kind of wondering what's been going on in the city anyway, since it's so polarizing and it's always in the big news and it's covered nationwide. So that's kind of what we're getting into today. And if people like him, we'll keep doing these and we'll mix these in every now and then. But I just kind of want to give people a heads up before they hop into today, that's really what you're getting into. And, as I'll say again, I don't know a ton, so I'm here to kind of be enlightened, and I'm here to have people on. I'm here to have conversations and just kind of listen to what's up. So, and also if anyone is interested and kind of wants to kind of hop in here and hop out on the show, reach out to us. Just shoot us a DM the account and whatnot, and we'll see what we could do. All right, let's really get into it now. All right, bang, bang. Welcome to Dog Walk, presented by Barstool Sports. It's Thursday. It's February 17th. Sitting down here, Carl's joining me, and we're also joined by Paul Vallas. So if you don't know Paul, Carl and I talked to Paul, and it was February of 2019. This show was 35 days old or something like that?
It was a big thing for us.
Yeah.
Chicago Mayor Week, and you were a distinguished guest. You did great. We got tons of positive feedback on our conversation, but that was a big thing for us.
Yeah, it was big. We talked to 6 of the candidates, not Lori. So it was 6 other candidates, and it was quite the week, like Carl said. But my main focus here, Paul, is why we want to bring you in. Obviously, you're a long time with the city and finance and the budget director. A ton of schoolwork and whatnot, but you're just you've had a lot of opinions about Chicago,
right?
And being the Barstool Chicago guy, so the way Barstool works, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but big company, our home base is in New York, and then we're the satellite office here in Chicago. And given how much Chicago's been in the news, people are always curious about it. So speak as if we're speaking to a national audience who doesn't understand what an alderman is, and just is kind of really out of the loop. Because I think people really are curious, and that's why you're here today.
Well, Chicago is I think it's the 3rd largest city in the country. It's still kind of quivering.
Yes, someone told me Houston might have passed it.
Maybe Houston might have passed it. I know it still has the 3rd largest school district. It's really a city of immigrants. At the kind of the epicenter of the city, all the major transportation hubs and lines, including O'Hare Airport, aviation kind of comes through the Midwest. And you have to understand, Illinois as a state has probably the 26th largest economy in the world. I mean, it's clearly the state itself is an economic engine in its own right. But the city, like other large urban areas, have really been facing their challenges. There's been a significant reduction in its middle income population in 1970. The district, I still speak like a school superintendent. The city had a middle income population of 50%. It's now down to 16%, and that's pre-COVID. There's been a massive exodus from the school system. It's gone from about 440,000 students to 330,000 students since 2003, 2004, almost the last 20 years. So clearly Chicago has probably more murders. Well, it does have as many murders as New York and LA combined. And even though there's been a significant increase in murders and homicides nationwide in the city of Chicago, we are now close to our peak homicide rate in the 1990s during the crack cocaine war, so to speak. New York obviously has had a big increase in crime, but their murder rate is still about 25% what it was during that same period. So clearly the city has many challenges, and many of the challenges that you read about that urban America is experiencing across the country there's kind of Chicago is like a microcosm of those challenges.
Okay, so right out of the gate, why do you think Chicago is struggling more than New York in that capacity?
Well, I think, I think Chicago, unlike Miami and other cities, have responded to COVID in ways that have made things far worse than better. You know, when people talk about the economic devastation of COVID, or for that matter, the impact that COVID has had on schools, it's almost like it's our self-imposed mitigations that have contributed to these problems. You look at the school system itself. Our school system, for about a year, our schools were in effect almost all last year closed down. There was I think the equivalent to 12 days actual in-school instruction. Everything else was done remotely. Well, you know, you can't put 340,000 kids on the street. And if you look at the violence against school-age youth and committed by school-age youth, it's skyrocketed. We've had almost 150 school-age children murdered during COVID, and I think we've had 7 or 8 who have died who had COVID. Most of those students or those young people had pre-existing conditions. Just to provide a contrast, there's been 10 times the number of school-age children who have died from accidents. So it just kind of gives you perspective. But yet, if you look at the homicides rates in Chicago, 8% of those arrested for murder last year, 9% of those arrested for shootings, almost 50% of those arrested for carjackings, 32% of those arrested for robberies, 17 years and younger. So it kind of, I mean, to a certain extent, that I think has been a contributing factor to the fueling of the crime, that it's really devastating. Obviously, Chicago's poorest communities, but it is really spreading throughout the city. You've seen a big increase in violence throughout the city.
And just, I actually don't know, because it's always over the news. How many strikes have there been in that period since? What was the first big one? Was what, the fall of 19?
Well, you know, prior to my arrival, there had been 8 work stoppages in 15 years prior to my taking over as school CEO back in the old days, 1995. And then from really 1995 until Rahm Emanuel, I think it was 2012 or 2013, there was a strike. And then there's been 2 work stoppages since, and 3 additional threatened work stoppages. So the bottom line is, technically, one could argue that since 2019, the schools have either been delayed, or there have been work stoppages, or a strike at least 3 times. And obviously that has disrupted the educational process too. But the unions were hell-bent on keeping schools closed all last year, and they succeeded in doing that. And I think the consequences have been devastating. And I've pretty much been railing about that from the very beginning. When I was superintendent, we kept our schools open. Even when we had snow days, we would keep the buildings open so that there would be a place for the kids to go. And there are so many needs that the schools have to fill for a school district where 80% of the kids come from families that are at or below the poverty rate, and where the vast majority of children come from families that are being raised by a single parent, and from families where only 1 in 6 of Black and Latino households can actually work remotely. I mean, when those schools are shut down for an extended period of time, it's with devastating consequence. And it's been in complete defiance of the science, which basically said that children are minimally impacted by COVID, and no evidence that the schools have ever been virus spreaders. So it's really been self-destruction. And when you look at our COVID responses economically, the industries that have been most devastated have been the industries that hire are populated from a work standpoint, middle income, lower income families, lower income workers. The service industry, the hospitality industry has been absolutely devastated. So what we've been doing in our mitigations is we've been doing serious, almost permanent damage. And I think that's just one of the reasons why certain blue states and certain, let's call them blue cities, are suffering in comparison to other cities and other states.
See, that's interesting. Were you aware of that since the 19 or since the pandemic and whatnot? I knew obviously there was an uptick in teen, high school aged crime, let's say, but I didn't know it was that drastic.
Like a 10x on.
No, I didn't know that. So that's very interesting.
What you also have is you really have lost a generation, and we're fueling the gangs, and there's because the district has lost student enrollment for 18 consecutive years. And if it were not for the infusion of Latino students into the system through immigration, things like that, the district would have lost many more students. And when you take the charter schools out, the traditional public schools have actually lost 155,000 students. Well, the last 2 years alone during COVID, the district has lost 25,000 students. Those are students gone. And a lot of them have dropped out, and many of the students who are attending are kind of attending school in name only because the remote instruction, I mean, there's been story after story about what a disaster remote learning was and how kids would like sign in and then not necessarily participate. There's been no accountability in that regard. But what's it doing? It's just fueling the street crime. It's fueling the street gangs. How many of these kids I mean, it's not like they're going to be returning to the schools. They're going to end up in the criminal justice system in one capacity or another.
And do you know the data before that? Because to me, I always thought that was just part of the game, I guess, is these gangs were finding these younger people because they get less charges because they get charged as minors. So is it like, are those numbers like how skewed are they from beforehand, I guess?
Well, let me tell you, the gangs in the 90s were much more organized and they were much more structured. And a lot of times the so-called street gangs, there was a study that I saw that basically said that there's a much smaller proportion of crime and serious crime being performed by the gangs than was previous. That doesn't mean gang crime is going down. It means overall crime is rising, but not necessarily linked with gang activities. So a lot of the crime that you're seeing is not like organized gang crime. They're packs of young people, doing carjackings or going in and doing smash and grab and things like that. You see what I mean? Yeah. It's a really decentralized. It's a real decentralized criminal element, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But all the schools are doing is graduating students into the criminal justice system, and that's why I've been such an advocate. At this point, I just think we need to go to 100% school choice system and give poor families the ability to select their schools, whether it's parochial or private, and create the type of educational competition because. If there's no more racist institution in this country today than the union-dominated urban public education systems. If you are black and Latino in Chicago and you are from a low-income family, you are educationally redlined because you have no alternative than your failing neighborhood school. And unions have blocked or capped charters. They've not only blocked the creation of new charters, they've actually blocked the charter school enrollment. They've capped charter school enrollment. So even if the charter schools, have additional spaces, they can't enroll additional kids. But in addition to that, of course, they've resisted any efforts to support poor families who want to send their kids to parochial and private schools, and they have resisted any efforts to reconstitute existing failing neighborhood schools. So your educational, the quality of your school is determined by your zip code. It's de facto educational redlining, and it may not be racist by intent, but it's racist by outcome. And you've got to break that stranglehold. You've got to break that monopoly, and you've got to give parents the ability to choose the best schools for their kids. You've got to give the community the ability to say, that's a failing school. We need a better model. And let them do what Indianapolis is doing and Denver and many other cities are doing. They're called Renaissance schools and innovation schools. Is the community is going out and they're picking better school models, and there's no collective bargaining agreement that can preempt them from picking a better model that might have a longer school day or a longer school year, but offers the things that can benefit their kids.
So have I seen you call the CPS mayor controlled?
Pardon me?
Have you said the CPS is controlled by the mayor, this in particular, Lori Lightfoot, more than others?
No, back in 1995, when I was drafted, I was city budget director at the time, I like to think it was a real golden age for the city, but people may have different opinions. But
the trucking corruption.
Well, but that was post my tenure there, I might add. But we were balancing budgets. We were doing massive infrastructure investments. We had union peace. We had 7 consecutive years of, we negotiated collective bargaining agreements. We had a record number of police on the street. It's when the crime that had peaked and it was like it peaked. I think the murder rate peaked close to 1,000, and it began to its steady decline. Mm-hmm. It began to follow the pattern that you saw in New York and some other cities. So I'm not saying it was a golden age, but it was at least a better time. And of course, we had 6 years. 6 years of balanced budgets. We did 78 new schools. We had a 40,000 increase in enrollment. So it clearly was a special time. But the mayor in 1995 got control of the schools. The legislature got tired of doing a Chicago public school bailout every year, and the Republicans actually gave daily. Jim Edgar and the Republicans at the time controlled the House and Senate. Believe it or not, there was a period in the last 4 decades, 2 years, when Madigan was not Speaker of the House. And so basically he got control of the schools, and he got an appointed school board. Now, so both he and, of course, Rahm Emanuel and Lightfoot, they've controlled the schools. They've had responsibility for the schools. Now, the union got legislation passed, which I think it's in 2026 or 2027, the system's going to convert to this massive elected school board, 22, 23 school board members. So she's going to lose, or whoever the next mayor is going to lose control by the third year into their tenure. So they're going to have a window to go in and do what needs to be done. Once you have an elected school board, the unions will probably dominate those elections, or at least be able to control enough seats to block anything constructive from being done. You know what I mean? I mean, the objective behind an elected school board is not so much to control the board as much as to prevent the mayor from being able to make unilateral decisions, but the impacting schools that the union disagrees with. But that, and the fact that Pritzker signed legislation empowering the Chicago Teachers Union to strike for any reason, just not financial reasons. That and the elected school board are going to, in effect, create at best a stalemate in the school district, where they're really not going to be able to do much to make the school system better. Long explanation.
No, I mean,
on that optimistic
note. But when you say like the CPS is controlled by the mayor, it makes sense, and the fact that it's going away sounds like it's only going to become more of a clusterfuck with these elections. Because as much as the union influences things, now if you give them 24 small local elections to influence, it'll be chaos.
Yeah.
Now, but isn't that, you say that it's a redlined education?
Mm-hmm.
Now, isn't that what a lot of people were really upset about? Because isn't that where they closed a bunch of schools? And then a lot of people were upset. There were protests. I don't know what was going on. But.
Yeah, the union. Obviously, there was a lot of criticism, a lot of opposition to the closing of schools during the Emanuel administration. But actually, there was a much worse reform. Back in 2004, they did a program called Renaissance 2010, and basically the strategy was to close 100 neighborhood schools and convert them to like new schools. And look, I'm a strong supporter of charter schools, but you don't take an existing school, turn it over to create a new school, and then require all the kids to apply to get admitted to the new school. So what happened was with that initiative was it destabilized schools throughout the city, particularly in the poorest communities, where a school was closed and it was reopened as a new school, and the kids had literally apply to get, to go to their neighborhood school. And that had a destabilizing effect. And you can begin to see the decline of enrollment. It seems to follow Renaissance 2010, because enrollment, which had dropped from a peak, it had gone from 514,000 in 79. I come in 95, and we're at barely 400,000. I leave, it's pushing 140,000. And then 3 years later, it begins to decline again, right about the time that they did Renaissance 2020. Now, Rahm comes in 20 years later because the system now has lost, or 15 years later, because the system has lost, between that period, the system had lost 70,000, 80,000 kids. And he's now got schools on the south and west side, they're at 20, 30% capacity. Mm-hmm. So he starts to consolidate them, or he decides to close them. So obviously he got a lot of criticism, and much justified, because he didn't repurpose those schools. For example, there are a lot of charter school operators operating their schools in warehouses or in rectories, in church rectories or whatever. They could have easily occupied those buildings and brought their students with them. There could have been a better strategy, but I believe that Renaissance 2010 did far more damage and started this kind of like this avalanche, and Rahm's closing of schools just made conditions absolutely worse. Let me point out that the biggest exodus from the Chicago public schools last 20 years has not necessarily been middle income. It's middle income families. I mean, that began even long before that. But the biggest increase, at least the last decade, has been black families, black students. There have been almost 260,000 in the last decade, 260,000 black Chicagoans have left the city, and they are overwhelmingly middle-income families with children. And so the exodus, the real exodus, the only thing stabilizing the school district's enrollment has been the significant increase in Latino population.
Now, is that people relocating to suburbs? Or are they leaving Illinois altogether? Is there data on that?
A lot of individuals have moved to the suburbs. So there was a flooding of the suburbs, and some have moved to Indiana and other states. I haven't looked at the data on where they actually went, but they're clearly, and there's been a whole series of articles, there's clearly been articles written about the black exodus from Chicago. Chicago's lost more black residents than any city, including Detroit, over the last 2 decades.
And that's because the opportunity for them is not as great.
I think that's because of crime and schools. Yeah, we can talk about taxes and things like that, or economic opportunity. But obviously, if you don't have quality schools, it's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? If you have rampant crime, how can you stabilize communities or revitalize neighborhoods if they're war zones? And of course, if you have inadequate schools, you lose middle class. So that creates conditions where you're not going to have the type of investment that is going to create economic opportunities in those communities. So it's like a vicious cycle.
So is there a bigger crisis in CPS or CPD right now?
Oh, I think they're both disasters. You have to understand, CPS consumes $9.4 billion. That's their budget when you include the pension subsidy that taxpayers provide to teachers. We, unlike the rest of the state, our teacher pension systems are funded by a special property tax levy that's about $500 million, and within 7 or 8 years it'll be twice that much. Where downstate systems are funded by the state, so there's always been discrimination against our taxpayers. But so the schools are spending $10 billion. The schools are spending the equivalent to $28,000 a kid. And when you take capital and operations and debt service and pensions out, they're spending $22,000, $23,000 a kid. What are we getting for it? What are we getting for it? And that's why it's just, when I see them saying, "Oh, we have one counselor for every 1,000 kids, or we don't have nurses in every school, or we have these large class sizes." Why? I mean, if you look at the website of the school district, at least on paper, there's one teacher. Pre-COVID, there's one teacher for every 17 kids and one employee for every 8 or 9. Where are they? How's the money being allocated? So it's just not the union. It's also this massive central office bureaucracy that's kind of this self-sustaining entity and is skimming so much money off the top. Only about 60% of what the school spends, maybe slightly over 60%, actually finds its way into instruction in the classroom. So
and who's running the show on that?
Well, look, you've had this self-sustaining centralized bureaucracy for years, and I just think it's a very inefficient system. It really is. When I took responsibility for schools in New Orleans, it was a terrible, terrible system. One of the worst in the country.
Do you mind telling our audience when that was? Or
yeah, that was right after Katrina. A year after Katrina, I was asked to go to New Orleans to rebuild the schools. They had difficulty getting the old school board was completely incapable of getting schools reopened. They actually, a year after the hurricane, and only like 14 or 15 schools had reopened. So I went down there and we decided to create a system of schools rather than a school system. So all the schools in New Orleans are decentralized. They're all autonomous, charter-like schools. They serve the local community, have local governing boards, but 98% of the non-capital and facility money goes directly to those schools to be used in the classroom. We're not skimming 10, 20% off the top. And the district took off, where it was the second lowest performing district in the state. For 7 years, it led the state in academic improvement, and now it's kind of like middle of the pack. It still has a lot of, it can get a lot better, but it's light years ahead of where it was. So that was kind of the approach that we took, and I think Chicago needs a similar approach. We also provided tuition subsidies for parents who wanted to send their kids to parochial and private schools. And incidentally, there wasn't a big exodus because there was so much school choice within the public school system. So that was Chicago needs a model like that. So the community has autonomy to demand a better school model if their local school is failing. Parents have a choice. If they don't want their neighborhood school, they have other educational options available to them, and to make sure that the money that is allocated is flowing to the school, flowing into the classroom, being used for instruction and student support services. And that's the system. It's that simple. And that's the system that needs to be created.
So what was your CPD thing then? What's your gist on them?
Well, look, I did a study. Visualize this for a second. And I'm going to post it. I submitted it as an op-ed. Clearly the police department is being significantly degraded. There are 1,500 fewer police officers and counting and climbing working in CPD today than there were prior to Lori Lightfoot taking office. In addition, Brown's kind of centralized unit strategy, he abandoned. If you remember, Interim Superintendent Beck from LA had basically said, we're going to have, our policy is we're going to push all the cops into the community, on the beats, control the detectives, the special units. We want the commanders to have, the local district commanders to have the resources that they need. And he completely reversed that. He created this like centralized unit, pulled 1,000 cops from the local beats. So now they're beginning to return some of these cops. But the bottom line is the combination of not filling vacancies and stripping officers from the local districts have resulted in many districts having anywhere between 75 to 125 fewer officers, including the most violent districts in the city. CWB Chicago, which does excellent work monitoring the police stats and stuff like that, did a piece 3 or 4 months ago where they looked at the 10 most violent districts and they documented how fewer cops they have now than they had then. Now, what's happened is when you're pulling cops out of their local districts and when you're not filling vacancies to help balance your budgets, because all mayors have done this, by the way. Lightfoot is just doing what Rahm Emanuel did, what Daley did. Rahm didn't fill 2,000 vacancies. He only started hiring cops again because crime spiked and he was getting a lot of heat from people like me, you know what I mean? And so it was election year, so he started ramping up again. But when you have fewer police officers available and then crime begins to spike, you know how you compensate? What you do is you start canceling days off. You start putting them on 12-hour shifts. You know what I mean? And all you get is tired cops. All you get is demoralized cops. I mean, the constant canceling of days off and the constant going to 12-hour shifts is exhausting. It's demoralizing the officers and it's punishing their families. So you've had this massive retirement, massive exodus of officers. Last year, almost 900 retired. They only filled about a third of those vacancies. Through February, I think another 350 are going. Okay, January and February alone, the combination. So, I mean, they're just leaving. They can't wait to leave. And if the court rules against the cops on this vaccination mandate, I predict that they could lose another 1,000 officers literally overnight, because there's a lot of officers, even those who have been vaccinated, who just don't want the city dictating to them. And so this massive exodus is disastrous. They can't fill these vacancies, number one. Other cities like Las Vegas and others are coming here and poaching our cops because the cops are just demoralized. In fact, Brown has been trying to force the cops to go to 12-hour days. I'm not talking about 12-hour days and then you get more time off. I'm just talking about 12-hour days, like 5 days a week. And he can't do it without negotiating, so he's using his emergency authority to do it. So, for example, they have this rule, the directive that came out that said, if there's a shooting in your police district, that watch immediately goes to 12 hours. So with the shootings that you've got in the city, you're de facto putting everybody on 12-hour shifts.
Almost every time, yeah.
And that's punishing families. I mean, these officers have families. They have it's straining marriages. These kids don't see their parents. It's creating a lot of stress.
Hey, let's take a quick break here because we got to talk about ChevyDriveChicago.com. ChevyDriveChicago.com is here for you because they are what Kane and Taze drive. Go to your local Chevy dealer today and go check out those Silverados, those Colorados, whatever it is. Chevy's got you covered. The Blazer, maybe. A ton of great options, obviously, at Chevy. But really, the big thing is here, like I'm saying, Blackhawks fans, they got this great promotion for you at ChevyDriveChicago.com. There's a special giveaway just for you. Your local Chevy dealers are giving away one Patrick Kane signed jersey. Entering is easy. Go to ChevyDriveChicago.com to enter to win. And if you're looking to drive a Kane and Taze drive, see your local Chevy dealer today. Hop on there. I'm telling you, if you really just type in your zip code, you could be able to see, your local dealership. So, and you get all the options. You can give them a call, and it's also a great spot for service. So, if you need the brakes done, if you need the tires done, whatever needs to be done, you could always trust Chevy. So, ChevyDriveChicago.com. Go check them out. Go make sure you're driving Chevy this winter and beyond, really. All right, let's hop back into the interview. And to be clear as well, these vacancies are not being filled because the academy numbers are so down. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that goes into the demoralization and people not wanting to be.
And they can't get people to sign up.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it used to be you take a police. When my son was in Afghanistan and he wanted to be a Chicago cop, but there were like 10,000 people applying to take the exam. He took that exam, took the firefighter's exam, and then he ended up getting hired in Wheeling, and then he got accepted into the fire academy, decided to become a firefighter. But it's the waiting list to be a Chicago cop, the number of individuals who would sign up to take the police exam. Now they have a fraction of those individuals. And the problem is the pool of really high-quality candidates is significantly diminished. So not only are they not hiring enough officers to replace those that are leaving, but you've got to ask yourself whether or not the quality of officers that they're getting is of the level that they need. And so it creates like this, you can't fill vacancies. The cops are under stress. Stressful situations can sometimes contribute to mistakes. You can't recruit a pool of so that you're hiring the best of the best. So you've got to lower your standards when it comes to hiring. That creates more problems as you're hiring individuals who perhaps or some individuals are not best equipped for the jobs. So it becomes so the cops make mistakes. There's more public outrage. There's more demands, more punishing of the police officers. It becomes a vicious cycle. Yeah. And I've tried to articulate, or I have articulated, a way out. And I've done a number of posts and an op-ed in the Tribune. I think November 22nd, basically the 10 things that the city needs to do to revitalize the police department.
So what's like the number one thing, I guess? What do you think is the big thing here? Because that's what everyone cares about is how do we fix this?
Well, let me tell you, the first thing you do is you need to completely eliminate the current the current leadership team at the police department. They have lost the support of the rank and file. Mm-hmm. And
so superintendent.
That means Brown and Carter and the whole crew need to go. Mm-hmm. You believe me, they have lost the rank and file, completely lost the rank and file. And if you did that, that would send a signal because their strategy is not working. They've been so preoccupied with these They're called positive community interactions.
I was going to ask you, PCIs.
PCIs.
You're always talking about PCIs. I have no idea what PCIs are.
You drive down the street, you wave at somebody, hey, that's a positive community interaction. In fact, they're supposed to be recording them. They're supposed to be documented. I had 10 positive community interactions. The mayor has a press conference. She says, we had 500,000 positive community interactions. We want to have 1 million or 1.5 million. That's what they're preoccupied with.
That's like a totally subjective.
Exactly. Well, let me tell you, they even have detectives spending time getting paid to go out there and collect positive community interactions. First of all, we're down about 300 detectives. We have a detective divisions that are 1/6 the size of New York. Even when you do per capita, it's 1/3 the size of New York. I mean, it's like, we don't have enough detectives to clear the cases. We've only cleared 30% of our murder cases since 2017. Only 4% of our shootings have been cleared since 2017. And we got people out doing positive community interactions. The 11th district, the most violent district in the city, and which probably makes it the most violent district in the nation.
Is that Inglewood?
Had 103, is it 103 or 108 murders last year, but they were celebrated because they were number 3 in positive community interactions.
Really?
Number 3. We're
That's
number
crazy.
3.
Which is 11th district?
I'll Google it, and I don't want to stigmatize neighborhoods, so let me let's just call it the 11th district.
Yeah,
I'm a little reluctant to throw out
that's
neighborhoods
fair.
or talk about individual neighborhoods.
That's fair.
But that's the absurdity. Since 2019, arrests have plummeted by over 70%. Across the board, arrests, 70%. There's been a corresponding increase in murders by about an equal percentage. But the positive community interactions, man, they're skyrocketing, Hey, positive community interactions. You could probably give somebody the finger and they'd write it down as a positive community interaction. You know what I mean? Whatever. Yeah. But it's just ridiculous.
Do you get this sense that, when Lori got elected, she was outside the large Democratic machine? She wasn't backed by Madigan. Tony Precwinkle, obviously you running for mayor, have a much greater sense, of what that machine looks like. But is there any sense that the large Democratic Party across the United States, the people who put Rahm in charge, the people who back a guy like Bill Daley for whatever reason you want to say.
Yeah, I know.
Do you think those people are sitting around and actually enjoying how bad things have gotten in Chicago?
No,
are they going, hey, we'll see what happens when we're not involved? Or is there some sense of actual fucking community here with the Democrats?
I don't know. I think it's... Look, the problem in this city, this city's been dominated by Democrats for what is it, 50 or 60 years? I mean, what do we have to show for it? Unfortunately, I think that the danger here is that, if they gravitate for it, I don't think the party itself, but if the powers that be in this city who always seek stability, okay? They're always seeking someone who can come in and stabilize the place, you know what I mean? Or somebody who checks all the boxes, whatever. The danger is, if they give up on Lightfoot and they seek someone else, are they going to seek someone who checks the boxes, or are they going to seek out someone who can actually run the city? I mean, really. Come on, man. They probably stayed with Daley too long. Daley handed us Rahm Emanuel, and look, what Lightfoot inherited from Rahm was a mess. When I was running, I was articulating how Rahm had created, not only had he done really destructive things to the police department, but how he was going to leave the next mayor in a financial mess. The problem is Lightfoot has just made things significantly worse. But the establishment always seems to give us these candidates. Everybody thought, Lightfoot, well, she's a former prosecutor and she checks the boxes, et cetera, et cetera. She seems to be independent. She's beating up on Burke. Right. It's like, maybe she'll be better. Maybe she'll be more stable. She'll be... she's more conservative than Tony Precwinkle. You know what I mean? They're all afraid of Tony Precwinkle coming in. But this is what they do. They try to find that candidate who can kind of who they can have a comfort level with, and in some cases they can kind of control and dominate. And so they continually select leaders or support leaders to run the city who you probably wouldn't hire to run your own business, for crying out loud. And this is what we get. And the risk is they're going to do the same thing this time around.
If you had to rate out of 10, what would you give Lori Lightfoot's term?
Oh, I think she's been a disaster, period. And look, the schools have been a disaster educationally.
2.5.
Look, let's look at three things. Let's look at crime. I rest my case. I think I've already beaten that.
Yeah.
Don't beat a dead horse on that. Her mismanagement of the police department. Brown was not in the first tier category of candidates. They weren't able to really get the best of the best. I remember when Brown came here. It's a lot of people I knew in Texas saying, "Oh my God, Brown's coming to Chicago." These people I know in Dallas who said, "Good." We're not disappointed to see him go. But clearly there's been a failure when it comes to the public safety strategy. Has been an abysmal failure. Second, schools. Schools were literally closed all last year, and of course, didn't we think that the union was going to not try to play this game this time around? She caved to the union 3 times before she lost control. Before Pritzker signed that bill, that gave the union the ability to strike for any other reason, the union was threatening to strike 3 times illegally. She could have abrogated the contract, and she could have basically said, all right, all bets are off. I'm going to institute these type of reforms. I'm going to extend the day, extend the year. The union had no grounds to strike. They would have struck illegally. She caved to the unions 3 times. So she's failed on schools. And when it comes to city finances, the COVID money is going to be gone next year. We're going to be down to, the city has gotten how much in COVID money? The city and the schools combined have gotten $6 billion in COVID money. This is largely discretionary money. The city's going to have, in next year's budget, $137 million left. City spending in Lori's last 2 budgets has grown by 60%. Have our revenues grown by 60%? We're going to be facing a massive financial cliff after this election, and that's only going to be closed by draconian cuts in these progressive programs that are going to be short-lived because she doesn't have the money to sustain them, by not filling police vacancies, because that's the largest number of vacancies that the city can bank on not filling to help balance their budgets, and another massive property tax increase. That's the only way out of it. So she's failed on finances, she's failed on schools, and she's failed on crime. Don't sugarcoat it. It's been complete failure, and we're paying the price. Granted, she inherited a hostile union that's more that deludes themselves into thinking that they're advancing a progressive agenda for the community. She inherited a police department that was in disarray. And she clearly inherited a financial mess from Rahm Emanuel, but she has made things significantly worse. And that's it. That's on the. I'm trying to be polite and optimistic here, but those are the facts.
I don't think that sounded optimistic.
Yeah, it's just a little. It's a little.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's
depressing
or grave, but it's on point. It sounds like you're.
Yeah. Well, look, we're. Do we want to become Detroit? And I'm not trying to be insulting to Detroit.
How possible is that?
Well, I don't know. I used to say that. Look, this city over the last 50 years has seen very little investment in. Other than some transit projects and things like that. The overwhelming vast majority of the investment has occurred in 10 of the city's wards. And the other 40 wards have been largely neglected on the south and west side. Have we done any environmental cleanup on the south side, for crying out loud? The south side lakefront, you look at these communities. We've done the environmental remediation. The life expectancy in the city of Chicago, depending on where you live, it can be as great as 30 years. You've got some people on the far south side, the life expectancy is in the early 60s. And then if you live in Lincoln Park, I think it's in the 80s. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but a lot of it's socioeconomic, but how much of it is environmental? So there hasn't been real equitable investment in the communities. Now, Lori's talked kind of a good game on doing some of those things, although a lot of what she's doing are things that were already in the pipeline through Rahm Emanuel. So I'm not suggesting that she is not making an effort, but given the financial quagmire that the city is in and the cliff that the city is going to face after next year, many of these initiatives that she has begun in these poor communities are not going to be sustained because they can't balance the budget. And any investment is going to be of only nominal benefit because she's not addressing the underlying problems of failing schools and rampant crime in those communities. You can't have economic development or stabilize the neighborhood or stop the exit of the remaining significantly diminished middle class or encourage more middle class families to move into the city if you don't have quality schools and if these communities are war zones. So I just don't see any strategy. I don't see any vision there.
Do you think Precwinkle would have done a better job?
No.
Worse or about the same?
I think her performance at the county is overrated too. Look, it's her secretary. It's her. I mean, Fox is her creation. I mean, Dart at the prison. All the problems with that. Look, I mean, she sets the budget for the county jail. She sets the budget for the state's attorney's office. They've talked about her fiscal management, the county's going to be facing a post-COVID cliff too. No, I don't think Precwinkle would have done any better because she would have. She had a closer relationship with the Chicago Teachers Union. They endorsed her, and she's been. I mean, it's Fox is her creation. The pretrial release program and the treating criminals as if they're victims. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't see where she would have done any better when it comes to the police department. And as I mentioned, I think from a budgetary standpoint, maybe she would have been a little more competent on the budget side. But county taxpayers are going to be facing a post-COVID hit too. And so, no, I don't think she would have done better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're gonna ask, then I have to ask about JB. Then, do you think he's not? You think he's doing just enough to be involved while not being involved at all? I feel like he's close enough. I feel like our governor is close enough to Chicago to criticize it, but isn't doing shit.
Well, in all honesty, look, the mayor has so much power and so much control. At the end of the day, look, her relationship, I've been critical of the city enough. I don't, and I certainly pointed out that JB has squandered a lot of the COVID money too. Look, I mean, they're talking about election year tax relief of $1 billion after, I think Illinois policy documents that they've actually probably increased all the taxes and fees combined like $5 billion. So who are they kidding? The state that still hasn't balanced its budget. So, but one criticism at a time. I think the mayor hasn't really gone to Springfield with a legislative agenda. You have to have a specific agenda. Look at the cannabis. Look at what they did with cannabis. We had an opportunity with the cannabis industry to literally take ownership of that industry in Chicago. One of the things that I talked about during the campaign was to really focus on investing in urban agriculture and using cannabis as a way to raise money and things like that, because you can, vertical farming and all those type of things. And what the city could have done is taken greater control or insisted that the city play a role in the handing out of the cannabis licenses, and particularly in the city and the distributorships, and maybe even taking ownership of that. When Pennsylvania after Prohibition, Pennsylvania created, opened the liquor stores. The state owned the liquor stores, but gave people in the community long-term leases to run the liquor stores. But the state was able to take a portion of the profits. Look at the money that cannabis is generating for the state, hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, local governments are getting 8% of the cannabis revenues.
Yeah, but then on the flip side, look at what's happening with the casino. Like, would they really have done a competent enough job to make it happen, or would it have been like, oh, they wanted to have their hand in that, and of course it's a botch job.
Look, my point is you create an entity that can own the casino, and then you basically hire a casino operator. You competitively bid, hire a casino operator to come in and operate the casino. They could have had McCormick Place operating as a casino, the old McCormick Place, retrofitted, opened a temporary casino probably a couple of years ago. So, but I mean, have they really done a better job awarding these casino licenses as is? Independent of the city control? It's the same thing with cannabis. I mean, literally, how many minority owners are there in the cannabis industry? You know what I mean? Now they're talking about going out, and now they're talking about targeting. LaShawn Ford and others have said, more licenses need to be targeted to minority owners. I mean, I would have given the community, I would have found local ownership, and allowed people in the local community in South and West Side to take ownership of the to become cannabis distributors. I would have insisted that half the money that is generated from cannabis at the state level be shared with local governments. The city shouldn't be getting $10, $15 million from cannabis. The city should be getting $50, $60, $70 million from cannabis. I had talked about using the casino money and the cannabis money and investing that money in economic development initiatives in the local neighborhoods to create local ownership, to invest in the rebuilding of social service infrastructure and food services in the local community, businesses that could be owned and operated in the local community. But we squandered that. I mean, we're getting pennies on cannabis. We have very little influence. We're probably 2 years late in not getting at least a temporary casino up and running at which we could have done at the old McCormick Place. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the perfect spot, the perfect location. So, I mean, what do we have to show for it? We won't have a casino open until the next mayor, the next mayor comes in. So,
what do you plan on running again?
Look, if the support is there, if the financial support is there, I'll run. But that's not why I've been posting. That's not why I've been, out front on these issues. I'm a policy wonk. I always have been. When I ran against Rahm Emanuel, if you remember, before Emanuel got out, I think I was the first candidate. Me and Willie Wilson were the first ones to enter the race. Then McCarthy and Lightfoot ended up in the race. And in the early polls, Willie and I were like, Willie was second, I was third, and there was a runoff. And in a runoff, I think I was the only candidate who beat Rahm. And then Rahm gets out, and 16 other people get in the race. Daley gets in the race. Chico gets in the race. Ferretti gets in the race. McCarthy gets in the race. And everybody, and their brother, Jerry Joyce gets in the race. Everybody floats into the race. They're like 16, 17 candidates. So it's people forget that Lori got into the runoff with only 6% of the registered voters. She got 17% of the votes, but the voting turnout in the primary was like, what was it, 25, 30%? So technically, 6% of the voters, technically one can argue, because whoever was in the runoff was going to beat Precwinkle. But technically one can argue that, she got elected mayor with 6% of the vote. So if the support is there, I'm going to run. But that's not why I'm doing what I'm doing. I stayed in the race the last time because I wasn't going to get out for a Daley or for the establishment candidates. You know what I mean? And I stayed in the race because I wanted to continue to articulate, reasonable, practical solutions to the problems that the city has experienced. And if you look at what I said in the campaign on public safety, on economic development, on taking full advantage of these opportunity zones, which we squandered, or for that matter, on school choice, I'm saying the same things that I said during the course of the campaign, because and so it's my reason for being visible, for maintaining a high profile, and for doing my op-eds and doing my posts.
Mm-hmm. Can you make me feel better? I'm in my mid-30s. I grew up in Chicago. I want to stay here for a while, buy some property. I don't want to leave Cook County or Chicago. Like, what are the things to be optimistic about for our generation?
Well, the city has a very diversified economy. We're still the center of the economic universe in the city when it comes to transportation hubs and things like that. We certainly have the institutions, from the universities to the hospitals to the research centers. I mean, look, and there is a pathway. The city controls $26 billion. The mayor controls $26 billion. The city's budget is $16 billion, but the mayor controls the schools, the airports, the CTA, the CHA, the parks and the city colleges. $26 billion is spent, largely determined by the mayor of the city of Chicago. That's an immense amount of resources. And so there's a pathway. When you look at those budgets holistically, there's a pathway. There's a pathway towards balancing this budget without decimating critical social programs, without doing the police attrition, which is a backdoor way of defunding the police. You can TIF money. We're expending $1 billion in TIF money a year. We're skimming $1 billion off the property taxes, and we're using it for development that is largely controlled by the mayor's office. There's no give and take on determining how that billion, and it's growing, how that $1 billion is spent. You could issue bonds, amortize the interest, and retire those bonds off TIF revenues that will be expiring over the next 20, 30 years. And you could raise billions to do massive environmental remediation on the south and west side and to do major affordable housing, and without raising property taxes a dime. So there are still avenues. There are still avenues to take. There is still a lot of flexibility, unlike cities like Detroit that had their economies decimated because they were kind of 1 or 2 horse towns when it came to, obviously, the auto industry. I mean, Chicago is still has a lot going for it. The same thing with the police department. You can revitalize the police department. You got to make the leadership change, because that sends a signal that things are going to be better. Then you have to make a commitment that you're going to fill these vacancies. And I'm talking about running 2 shifts a day, 2 classes a day, and recruiting on the military bases, retired military personnel, people who are leaving the military, like kind of a troops to a police program. There's or going out and incentivizing police officers to come to Chicago and doing the same poaching that they're doing for us. But if you have new leadership, and if the police know that they're going to get a reasonable schedule, you're not going to be working them to death, and you're not going to be penalizing them for proactive policing. You're not going to be wasting their time with these little like PCIs, or for that matter, penalizing them with the type of rules and regulations that not only keep them from chasing people, doing vehicle chases, but literally keeps them from chasing somebody who's committed a crime down an alley, because all the requirements and the rules that you need to follow almost put you in a position to be reprimanded, and only it will give lawyers an excuse to challenge your suit of the city if on behalf of the criminal suspects. You can transform, you can stabilize the police, and you can get things moving in the right direction. What I'd also do is to do what people like what Giuliani did in New York before he lost his mind, when he was rebuilding the New York Police Department, and what they did in Dallas after Brown left, and what they did in London and many other cities, is they basically flooded their detectives divisions by inviting police officers to return to duty in a part-time capacity and to do nothing but work violent crime cases. You come in to protect witnesses. So there's things that can be done even on the police side to stabilize the situation. It's filling vacancies, it's removing the obstacles to proactive policing, and it's having a community policing strategy where you put an emphasis on having the cops on the street, manning the local beats, and I think that could be a difference. With insofar as schools are concerned, 2 real simple things. You go to a school choice system, parental choice, where you give parents the ability to select the school for their kids, whether it's public or private, and you won't financially decimate the schools in the process, because remember, the money is supposed to follow the kids. So if 10% of the kids end up going to parochial or private schools, well, great. 10% of the money is going to follow the kids. Probably less than 10%, because the district's always going to skim some money off the top. But the bottom line is, and there's no reason why you can't empower communities to select if their school is failing. You can't empower those communities through their locally elected school councils to go out and select other models. So there are pathways, there are avenues, but you need somebody, the city needs somebody who understands what needs to be done, knows how to get it done, and has the political will to accomplish it. And one of the things that I try to do in my posts, and I invite people to go to Paul Vallas, my Facebook post, Paul Vallas, and to go in my LinkedIn, is just not to complain, but to offer solutions. Because I've talked about witness protection programs. I've talked about how to get lead out of the drinking water. I mean, we have the state now has a mandate for us to do lead removal. 50 years, we're supposed to replace all the lead pipes. Meanwhile, we're going to poison kids for another 15 years because 97% of our pipes are lead, and most of our pipes have lead elements in the drink that find their way into the drinking water, and it's going to take decades to replace those pipes. But it could take in 6 months. You could provide every low-income family who doesn't have water filtration devices or can't afford to buy bottled water with a home water filtration device for pennies, and ensure that their families, for the first time, probably in 3 generations or 4 generations, are going to be drinking water without any lead contaminants. And the lead contaminants do permanent brain damage, and the lead contaminants have been linked to behavioral problems, and there are some studies that link the lead contaminants to behavioral problems that are related to people's self-control and people and to even violence. So there are avenues, and what I've tried to do is articulate what those solutions might be.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of interesting information, Paul. So
too much information, unfortunately.
No, I appreciate you coming in.
No, my pleasure.
You said, Paul Vallas? It's on Twitter too, or is there like
Twitter, Paul Vallas. I'm tweeting all the time, but my public Facebook page is just Paul Vallas. Anybody, there's no limit on the number of people who can access that page, and I will repost my stuff on LinkedIn. And the Tribune's given me the opportunity to do an op-ed. They give me a lot of space which is always a dangerous thing. Hopefully, they'll continue to do it after the show. But they've invited me to make a contribution like every other week, and I've done something on schools. I've done something on public safety, and I'm going to actually do something on the whole criminal clearance rate. What people don't realize is that on any given day, anywhere from as many as 90% of the violent offenders are actually on the street because the police, because of their understaffed, the lack of detectives, the lack of proactive policing, they've only cleared 30% of the murder rates since 2017 and 4% of the shootings, and single digits when it comes to carjackings and other serious crime. So that tells you that that the overwhelming vast majority of individuals who have murdered someone, or for that matter have shot and wounded someone, or have committed robbery or whatever, they are actually on the street and walking the street. Well, that problem gets compounded because when you look at if you look at Fox has elected not to charge 3 times the number of individuals that her predecessor elected not to charge. In other words, she is electing not to charge far more often than her predecessors. So even if you are arrested, if you happen to be part of that, small percentage that end up getting elected, there is a chance that you may never be charged. And then if you are arrested and you are charged, there's a 72% chance that you're going to get bail. You're going to be home on an ankle bracelet. So because 72% of violent offenders and serious gun offenders, have been released through the pretrial release program. So look at the percentages. A fraction of the individuals committing serious crimes getting elected, a large number of those individuals never being charged, and in the majority of those, being released and sent back into the community. So on any given day, close to 90% of the violent offenders are walking the street. You wonder why the police can't get witnesses. You wonder why the police can't get support in the community. The community's not afraid of the cops. The community's afraid that the cops can't protect them. Last year, there were 58 mass shootings in Chicago. That means mass shooting is 4 or more shootings at one time. I haven't seen the updated data, but the Sun-Times did this analysis, and at least through the end of the summer, they had only made 1 arrest. 58 mass shootings. At the time, there were 39 when they did their study, 1 arrest. And over the last 6 years, there's been over 1,000 people shot and wounded in mass shootings, only 6 convictions. Only 6 convictions. Why? Because people are afraid. Mm-hmm. People are afraid. You remember the shooting in Austin where and where no one was charged? Now they're coming back and they're charging them on guns. They couldn't get any witnesses because people are afraid, because these individuals, if they are arrested, and they rarely are, just will probably be released on bail, and they'll just simply be returning to the street. You see? And yeah, they may not be returning a large number of murders to the street, but they are returning a large number of shooters or people who have been involved in gun trafficking or have done assaults or robberies. They're being returned to the street. And if you look at CWB, because they followed this, they have this list, and they followed a number of individuals who have been arrested who were out on felony bail. And a lot of these shooters are individuals who are on felony bail for like carjacking or robbery or assault and things like that. So they're just graduating up. They're going up the ladder. Correct, you see what I mean? And their failure to do this, their failure to arrest these people, to charge these people, and then to deny them bail, these serious offenders, are just creating conditions in the community where the community is literally living in terror, and it just adds to the difficulty that the police have in trying to keep communities safe. So anyway,
you'll be talking about that in the Tribune.
I'll be talking about that in the Tribune.
Oh yeah, crazy, man. Well, let's hope, like we said, for some positive solutions. Once again, that's Paul Vallas. If you want to go check him out, Facebook, Twitter, wherever. Paul, thanks again.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
You stopping in.
Thanks for giving me so much of your time.
Great Twitter follow. Great Twitter. I have to say it. Great Twitter.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
All right, everybody. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow. See you then.